big, happy family. Your boys and my boys.
Okay, everybody, we are here with Mark Benard, the founder of the most awesome school ever here, Lost Boys Studios, School of Visual Effects, which I believe you guys now have two different locations. You have one originally in Vancouver that you started, and then you have a new one inside of Montreal.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Did you want to give a little background on yourself and how you started this school?
Sure. I'll try and just try to figure out our time stretch here. I'll encapsulate a bit, and we can go into more detail later if you find something interesting in there, Matt. So yeah, first off, thanks for having me, Matt. This is great. I learned about your channel, seeing my students exploring some of your videos in the past too. So it's great to see content like this hitting YouTube, something that's like readily available to everybody to keep researching in their journey towards their career dreams. So yeah, a little bit about me. So Mark Benard. I've been doing visual effects for forever. Probably 94 is when I started the journey into this. See, the first 10 years of my career, well, let's say the first year. So out of school, just like anyone who might be coming out of school, I started my career at a company called Image Engine. So Image Engine's fairly big now. Some of you may have heard of them before. They work on a lot of big feature films. They're also working on Mandalorian right now too. They're owned by Cinesite at the moment, but when I first started, they were just a little post-production graphics team. So there's like three of us locked away in a dark room. And so I really consider that was my main education. There wasn't a lot of education options for us back in the day. So I took like a part-time 3-month program that was mainly software centered. I had already trained myself in something called Lightwave 3D on an Amiga, which is totally dating me, but it was the coolest thing that a consumer could ever afford. And school taught me something called Alias Power Animator, which evolved into Maya. It was like Maya's daddy. And so from school, got into Image Engine, and what was really cool there is essentially it was a volunteer thing. It was hard to get a job in the industry back then just because the industry was so new. So like I said, there's only 2 guys working there when I started. And it was volunteering for a music video. So essentially that was the best way to get some experience back then, is to volunteer. So I volunteered and worked my summer, about 3 glorious months, on a really cool artsy-fartsy music video. And what the deal was is I was able to gain access to their workstations overnight. So in those days, these workstations, these Silicon Graphics indies, they were about $110,000 a pop. So to get access to 3 of these things was a big dream for me. And I would go in just as the guys were checking out at the end of the day, and I would stay until they came in the next day and kicked me out. And eventually an opportunity for an actual job came up, and I could start getting paid. So I worked at Image Engine for a year, and like I said, it was a post-production facility that we were part of. So a lot of gold beveled text with little cheesy lens flares on it for corporate video clients and things like that. But at that time, something changed in Vancouver, and that's when MGM Studios started up. So a lot of TV series were kicking up in Vancouver. That was the beginning of when it started to boom, at least for TV series. And so we saw this opportunity coming up. I know Image Engine, together we worked on some really basic stuff, just touching into that, doing something called playback, which is graphics for on-screen. When people are using computers, you'd see all the cool stuff like that. But I wanted to do more. It's made me hungry once I learned about what this was. And so a year in, I was like, okay, you guys they weren't quite ready to step foot into that market. It was very different. It was very difficult. It was all new territory. So I was like, I'm going to make that leap now. Thanks for everything. And I left Image Engine and started Lost Boys. Lost Boys existed as a service shop for about a decade. We worked on a little bit of everything. Well, actually, a lot of everything. Starting out, like I was saying, the TV series were the biggest opportunity in Vancouver at the time. So there was a series called Stargate. Before that, I worked on a sci-fi series called Outer Limits. And obviously X-Files and Millennium were all shooting in those times too. And yeah, about a year of being on my own. This is just because, again, if I wanted to do what I really needed, I had to do it on my own. I started off as a 3D generalist, And what was cool is my clients would bring my 3D elements into multiple post-production facilities across Vancouver. So I was able to go into those sessions and start learning about compositing at that point, because like what it was compositing. Back then it was a really special thing. It was very hard to get into. They used these $1 million workstations to be able to do compositing, the discrete logic Inferno systems. So just to even see one of these things was relatively special. So I get to be on these sessions and learning about the whole section of visual effects, what all went through it, and kind of learning about how post-production facilities ran, what worked well, what didn't work well. And at that point, just as I was starting to kick off, there's something that made Canada very popular for visual effects, and it right now they say, oh, it's the talent, but back then a big instigator was tax credits. So a lot of work went to Canada in order to take advantage of tax credits, and essentially it was like for whenever dollar an American producer spent on a Canadian paycheck, the Canadian government would send some money back. So, but there was all this demand to use Canadian talent, but the industry wasn't developed. So what we had to do is kind of look outside a little bit and find ways of learning from other facilities around the world. So at that point, I partnered with a shop out of Los Angeles. It took a while to find that partnership. We met with lots of different people. It was a fun time to be 20 years old, flying business class around, meeting with all these old white men. But eventually, we found a deal that would work, and I partnered up with Virgin Digital Studios. So they had 55 studios back in LA, and they handled a lot of, like, there was Virgin Records at the time, so really cool music videos that I used to grow up on and really aspire to do. So that was cool. And my deal was, I need you to bring one of these Inferno systems to me, because I could get small loans to be able to get 3D workstations, which were about $60,000, but $1 million out of my reach. So that was great. So they put an Inferno in, and we picked up our first big compositor. And that was the beginning of Lost Boys as a service shop. So like I said, we spent several years doing TV series. TV series is a great place to learn. You're going to be doing a large variety of different work at a very high pace. So you really learn how to prioritize and basically make that illusion sell with the amount of time that you have. From TV series, though, there's always a limit on how much quality you can get, because that eventually, no matter how efficient you are, the timer runs out and you just have to move on to the next show. And at the time, my sister companies, part of the Virgin Group, I had one in Mexico City, Virgin Television Mexico City. They did a lot of commercial work, a lot of high-end commercial work. But the 3D wasn't so developed in Mexico City yet. So we had an opportunity to partner with them on some commercials, and we got our feet wet on this Bacardi campaign, which was a really lucky score for the first project, because it was really high art direction quality in these things. So very, very high production value, really cool sets, really cool art direction, really cool models, really cool outfits. Everything was just awesome. And when we could put our work on top of that, it just pushed it to this level that we had never been able to hit before. And something that was cool with commercials, you got to understand your shots are so much shorter than when you're working on a TV series. TV series shots were getting quite long. Your average is about 5 to 7 seconds. But these guys were doing these big, massive establishing shots of over a minute. And it was kind of brutal as on ours to try and pump out that much. So to work on a shot that's only 15 frames long is amazingly liberating, because the amount of problems you can solve in those 15 frames, it's a lot. Only so many problems can come up. Even if you had a massive problem with, let's say, a frame that just would not render, you could literally go into Photoshop and paint that extra element frame into that shot and make it sell, make it work. So we could really push our quality bar. And when we did that campaign, it won us a lot of awards and kind of put us on the map for the higher level 3D specifically. So that started our commercial work, and we did a lot of commercial work for over the years. And again, it was kind of this weird cycle. I think it's, as an artist, you really love developing new skills. You love going in a new territory. You don't really kind of know all the when you're looking at something for the first time, there's pros and cons you normally balance. You don't know the cons yet when you're entering into new territory. So that's always kind of exciting and fun. But anyway, after doing commercials for a while, again, we wanted to branch out. We wanted to learn new things, and game cinematics kicked in. So with game cinematics, World of Warcraft had just made a huge splash. No one had seen game cinematics to that quality level ever before. And it made it so that most standard game producers could not develop that kind of thing in-house. They needed specialized talent. So that began our journey into high-end game cinematics. We worked a lot for Electronic Arts. Obviously, they're a big one in Vancouver and all over the world doing game cinematics. And other markets we could tap into, feature film. So Vancouver now does a lot of feature film visual effects, like a huge percentage of feature film visual effects are produced here. But back then, it was very, very small. They would film here and they would go back to Hollywood and they do their post-production there. So the amount of film work we got to do, generally it was on things that weren't like super high profile things. Maybe a lot of Disney television shows or Disney feature films with animals that could do tricks, the Air Bud line and things like that. So cute animal films. Not something that was like the cream of the crop there, but it was still, it taught us how to work with cinema resolution effects and also dealing with all the color depth issues and all that. So it trained us in that. And music videos were a little thing too. And so eventually, through those 10 years, I was exposed to a lot of different things. And I wore a lot of different hats. I'm very hands-on. I like to understand how everything works. I'm kind of manic on that side of it. So within the company, we were only 20 of us, and we were able to compete against very large companies and beat them in a lot of quality-based awards. And so through that, I was able to try a little this, a little that, and understand the whole setup from modeling all the way up to visual effects on-set supervision and things like that. So it gave me a neat perspective. And at that time, those 10 years in, I started having children. So having a family is a whole other job that takes just as much work as running an insane little studio. And I had to make a decision at that point. I couldn't do the same hours. I lived at my studio. It was something that was my life. I had, in order to do that quality, you had to essentially just be like you're a freak in a circus show, just putting everything you've got into these things. So sorry, I got distracted there. We were talking about being the freak in the circus show. Children, family. So at that point, I had to ramp down the studio, and it was really tough. It was really hard. These people were my friends. This was my life. This was my identity. But I had to take a break from it to be able to focus on new things. So what I did in order to find something to do while I was raising my family is education was something that I always thought had a need. When Lost Boys, when we hired new talent, we would hire these people that they all had potential. That was the only thing we could get out of a school was potential. We'd see potential in someone, and then we had to train them on the job, just training, learning by doing, right? It's like throw them in the fire and teach them as we go. Mentorship was a big thing. People with the experience would help them out. So education was always in the back of my mind. It's like, why is education not working right now? So when this job opportunity came up at a local film school, I won't name it, but they're one of the bigger ones, they had a visual effects and animation program, and they needed a lead for the visual effects program. So like, I'll try that out. So for 1 year, I worked there and did my best to try and design what I thought was the proper curriculum for developing a visual effects artist. Unfortunately, it was project-based learning is something that's I think is critical for a visual effects artist to learn their trade. And I just could not get the support that I required in order to do that. They just weren't ready for it. It's like put a kid in front of a computer, let them learn. Whereas it takes a lot more than that to learn visual effects. You need to get the camera. You need to be able to shoot things. You need to film. You need to provide all those things that the production industry provides for post-production. So at that point, it's like I need to have the freedom to be able to do this my way. And running a company all your life, you kind of get used to that freedom. So it's like, thanks again, got to move. And I started Lost Boys Learning. So Lost Boys Learning was the first iteration of our school. It's now Lost Boys Studio School of Visual Effects. But in the beginning, it was just learning. And I went back over to Vancouver Island. That's where I grew up, in a small town. And started in my home studio with the 6 artists from around the world. And I considered us to be the very first visual effects school. The only thing we taught was visual effects. We specialized in visual effects. You didn't have to go through months and months of other things. On the first week, you were doing visual effects. We were filming plates. We were integrating graphics and manipulating live action footage. So for the first 6 years, we were over on the island developing, and it was a generalist course. We taught a little bit of everything inside of visual effects. But at that time, Vancouver was exploding. All the major players were coming into Vancouver. So you had Digital Domain, Industrial Light and Magic, MPC, which isn't there anymore, but we had all the big guys came in. So it was a pretty exciting time to get back to Vancouver. So when we went back to Vancouver, I decided that was a good moment to really shift our training structure. We saw that our artists, all of my graduates, were getting hired in one of 3 departments. They were being hired as compositors, They were being hired as effects artists, and they were being hired as lighters. Those three departments seem to be very challenging for the traditional schools to be able to train in. They did a lot of modeling, they did a lot of animation, but those more specialty niche areas, they just didn't have the specialties to be able to push along those zones. So it's like, considering that the studios are hiring you for a very specific trade within visual effects, why are we not focusing that precious amount of time that the student has with us dedicated to that actual trade and craft that they're going to be employed in afterwards?
Exactly.
Because yes, as a compositor, it's great to know a little bit about effects, but you don't have to know Houdini like the back of your hand. You don't have to know those very specialized skill sets in order to be a good compositor. There's other things that you need to focus on. So by allowing our students to focus in on those crafts for 1 year, we were able to blow the roof off of what quality bar had been set in education for those crafts. Studios reacted very positively to it. They gobbled up our students as soon as I could produce them. And it went from there. And we always try and keep a very industry-focused approach to it. So it's like, what does the industry need? What is a responsible choice as a school to train in? Like, does the industry need a ton more modelers right now? No, like, a lot of their assets are being outsourced. So it's like, okay, let's not pump that out. And even if you looked at how our school is structured, it's a small school. We qualify as like some of the highest quality, but it's still this small boutique vibe. Our effects program, which one of the main programs, we only take 6 or 7 students every intake on that. So it's very, very small, very, very focused. Comp is about 12 students per intake.
Wow.
And then, of course, that happens in Montreal as well. There's a mirror, but that also represents that's the balance of how artists are sized inside of film studios. So if you look at it in a typical film studio, it's called a pipeline, right? You have all those different departments that the visual effects go through in order to get produced. And if you look at the ratio of artists inside of those departments, there's a very specific ratio. And you'll see we produce like twice as many compositors as we do effects artists, because the industry needs twice as many compositors as they do effects artists, even though you hear a lot of demand for good Houdini guys. But still, department balance is important, and we don't want to ever oversaturate the market. We feel that it's very important to nurture a really healthy environment in both of the developing markets, Vancouver and Montreal. And so that's where we've really stuck to our discipline on that, and not grown out of control and just kind of ever sacrifice the quality bar.
That's one of the questions I was going to definitely ask. What is the student body there? And those numbers are unheard of compared to most colleges.
Yeah.
But I can tell, you remind me of a friend of mine I used to teach with in Chicago. I taught at 3 of the top or concentrations of VFX in Chicago, 3 of the major universities or colleges. And you remind me of one guy I taught with, who's still teaching there, named Chris Tadine.
Okay.
He is just, you have that energy, and that you can just tell when you're talking to somebody, you're a different type of founder, because the founders I've always bumped into are always cold, and they're all about making money. You know what I mean? And I could just tell right off the bat that you're concerned, and you definitely. I mean, when I saw your site and I saw what you guys were doing, it was weird, because it was everything that I saw as far as what worked in both private schools and public schools and trade colleges in Chicago. I saw it all culminate into a school that worked. And I'm not bragging on you. I'm not making this up. When I saw it, I went, "This is it. They got it." Now Noman was another one, but when I saw Lost Boys, I went, "Oh my gosh, you guys have got it figured out." And it was weird, because when I taught at Columbia, which is in Chicago, which is the largest film school, which has visual effects element to it, a department, we were incorporating classes that were getting the practicum films, the really good films, and they were required to do 1 or 2 visual effects shots with the visual effects department. We had our own in-house VFX group, and the learning and the acceleration and the quality of the work went through the roof, because we were like this in-house VFX house for practicum films, which were high quality films. Yeah. And then I look at the other problems, like, why have so many students? Why, if somebody has a pulse, we can let them in the door? That's gonna that is, to me, the most important thing you have to take out of the equation, is not let every person in the door, because if you do that, you have that disparity, that huge contrast between, like what I drew up this little picture here, and see if I can get it sized up so you can kind of see it. of Baby Huey.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I like movies, and the instructor is being clobbered, while on the other side of the spectrum, there's these really awesome students that get through the door and they really want to know what to do. And they say, oh, I hate this school. And it's just, I'm paying good money for this. And there's just no way around it. And of course, you own the business. It's your business. It's your dream. You have control. And you're not being dictated to by somebody saying, you really got to get the numbers up because we want to expand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is such a compromise beyond compromises. And I'm glad to hear that you are keeping the sizes so down. I mean, well, eventually they'll grow. But, I mean, I have heard even schools like Noman, this is from what I've heard, that there is some people I know have been there at the beginning of Noman, and now they're where they're at now with Noman, and they're saying, like, some of the stuff became redundant, but they were really talented and went off to big studios, and some people may need that redundancy.
Yeah.
But they were like, I'm taking off now. I got what I needed. I'm not saying it was bad, but I take off now. But the quality and the reels I'm seeing out of your website, the YouTube channel, is just like, oh my gosh, like.
Well,
so
thanks.
I mean, congratulations, man.
Yeah. No, that's the key right there. I think as far as like allowing anyone in, I think the way we've designed the programs being very specialized, it has a natural filtration already. It's like the people that say, I like movies, they're not going to just sign up for a compositing program or effects TD program or a lighting program because they don't know yet. They're just beginning their journey, right? And they don't even know that there's this like little niche departments with these very specialized skills pulling this off. So it is important. I do think, though, one of the things that I would like to see more of, if we're going to talk about any issues here, is generalist programs. I do think there's a good need for them because you do need someone to be able to understand the entire industry and be able to pick what they are suited best for. So I think that's where film schools and like public schools can really play a good part in that, in exposing students to this broad range of what even like visual effects versus working in gaming versus working in animation, and then what are the individual departments. Just start the journey there, and hopefully public schools can do it in a slightly more cost-effective way so that they can still afford to do that finishing training and hone their craft and then get that gateway into an industry job with a school like Lost Boys. So I do think that we need to look at a different model that the current education pathway is following, with this a little bit of everything. And I mean, as a business, I understand that it was hard for us to make that business decision to say, no, we're just going to hire people that know what they want to do. And they have to understand that they have to already started their journey as a compositor, started their journey as an effects TD. So that's, as a business, that's a bad idea because you get less people in. But for quality, it works out really well. But yeah, a lot of those schools, there is that pressure to teach a little bit of everything. The kid, and then it might even be industry based. They don't even know. It's like, yeah, we'll teach you to do games or animation or visual effects. Like, no, don't believe them. They'll just teach you about those things. So I'm hoping more specialized schools start up and focus in on niche areas where hopefully there's more artist run schools in the future, and they can just nail those niche areas and produce proper entry talent. And a whole other spiel of why that specialized training is important. But yeah, we can go into that next if you want. I think I may have blown past a bunch.
I was going to say one of the other things that I really dig about your what you guys are doing was another element that I happened to see, in that whole practicum situation. I'm like, we need high quality footage. We don't need these guys running out the door with a 5D, and being like, all right, record something. I don't have a Steadicam. I don't have lighting. I don't have a crew. I don't have a cast. And you have, I think you've also partnered with another company, right? Besides doing your own high professional live action footage, you've also partnered with a different group that has, I forgot the name of it. They supply the assets or something. It's a group that you guys partnered with.
We produce the vast majority of our content. Okay. There might be the odd little bit of stock footage that students purchase for their personal projects, or just like use the same concept but on a fresh plate. But you're specifically for compositing. It's critical to be able to get some production, just equivalent footage to be able to work on. And yes, it's commonly underestimated how much experience goes into filming something that's going to work out well when it comes to the post-production side of things. And I think that's where a lot of them fall flat, is a student shouldn't shouldn't have that, be expected to have that experience yet when you put a camera in their hands and toss them out the door. I think it's a great time to start exploring how complicated it is to film a nice designed visual effects shot that's going to work well. But they're not going to have that skill for a while. It's going to take years of experience in the industry to start developing those instincts on like what makes a good, well-composed visual effects shot. How do you design something like that? So that's definitely something I brought to the table. Just schools don't have visual effects supervisors on payroll to be able to think about those things for them. So that's what I poured a lot of my energy into, is how can we shoot something that looks as interesting and production level as possible. And personally, I really enjoy that aspect. And I'm so glad that we do that, because it gives me a chance to get off the machine, get behind a camera, and use that experience that I typically watched as a visual effects supervisor, but to design my own side of things. And that can be my sole priority when I film something. I don't need to worry about the sequence so much. I don't need to worry about dialogue. I can go, what makes killer visual effects shots work? So yeah, we pour a lot of energy in filming footage for them. Every year we film another batch of fresh footage. We can't film for every individual student. It just takes too much time. It's better for us to pour our energy into filming like a really nice shot that the class can use if they want. And and that's just what really matters. Give them really good footage so that when their demo reel comes out of here, it looks like they could have worked for a little visual effects studio for a year or so. And that's commonly something that the industries at first thought they had done. It did take training. We did have to educate the studios, though, because they weren't used to the Lost Boys style of reel. So they were used to the typical film school graduate reel, which is a lot of little personal projects, like little short films, little things like that. But that's not what, as a studio, that's not what you need in an artist. You need highly specialized skills. So yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But us filming that obviously gives them that leg to stand on. And also, like, if it's a really cool, inspiring shot, you can pour more energy into it than this thing where you're just like, oh my God, that totally didn't work the way I wanted when I filmed it. I'm going to try and make this work somehow. And like, we worked for weeks on a single shot. Sometimes you might work on it like back and forth throughout the entire year. You might work on it for a month and a half on a more complicated shot. So you do need to be able to love that shot. You got to really, really, really want to work on it to be able to spend the amount of time on it. So yeah, that's a big factor, and a lot of schools don't consider that, and they don't give the students the materials that they need to actually hone in on the craft. But yeah, we just do it a lot ourselves. I'll do the camera, so I'll run camera. And obviously I'm VFX Soup and doing the design on the shots, but I get a lot of help too. So we have a lot of our staff is all very creative, and they've come to love that part of the process too. So they're always helping with the filming. And my wife Ria, who's also, we all wear lots of hats at a little business like this, but she has a special effects makeup background and also film background. So I get her help all the time on these things to try and make it a little more fun, a little more interesting, a little more cool. We've done some pretty interesting setups. We've done like full prosthetic creature heads and things like that too, all on shoestring, duct tape, and rubber cement budget. But yeah,
you guys are literally, and that's the thing, is like I used, when I had my interview with Hugo Guerrero with Hugo's Desk, I started out with a clip from the movie Wall Street, and that's where Gordon Gekko is in front of an audience of these stockholders, and he's like, management has no stake in the company. And you guys are literally a mother and mother and father, mom and pop, and you are responsible for your business, and you want it to have a reputation for it. You don't want to just like sell out, and because that's what I see so much in these schools. There is no person taking responsibility for what's happening, and I've seen schools go from certificate, fast track to let's dive into the Department of Education, get an AA. Oh, wait, BA, there's a lot more money in BA. Let's jump over to BA. Then the curriculum gets completely watered down. Yeah. There's no fast track, and it's just like, it just becomes another school where you got to take annoying classes like physics, and it's like, who cares about all that stuff? You learned it in high school.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that, because that is something that a lot of people... We're so programmed to just like, okay, you got to go get your degree, right? You got to go spend 4 years in school and get that piece of paper. But the visual effects is very different than that. And sometimes that can get in the way of your development if you have to wait that long, because like you're saying, things change so fast because we're a technology driven industry that something that you may have learned in first year is already obsolete by fourth year, and you have to be adapting to new things. We have a 1 year program, and I found that's a sweet spot. 1 year is a lot of time. If you focused on one thing for 1 year, you will have a good mastery of that subject matter in that year.
Now, is that 1 year? Is that 1 year like 2 semesters in a summer, or
It's a
is
whole year. So in
oh,
private, we don't really, I mean, we can call things semesters and
okay.
terms, but you're at Lost Boys for a year, and we're going to hammer through projects just like a studio. We've assembled ourselves to be, I enjoy the studio aspect of it. I miss the old days when I had my studio. So the school looks like a visual effects studio. And that's the priority obviously is on efficient education. So we have a bit of a hybrid setup, but it is very important that it feels like a visual effects studio, and they are developing those instincts inside of that year. So anyway, back to the year-long intensive. Think about it. If you think about it from an economical standpoint, or just like just basic math. So if you come to Lost Boys, and let's say your friend goes to a 4-year university program, you come to Lost Boys after that 1 year, very hard work. It's very intense. I'm not going to undersell it. It is so hard. You'll probably have never done anything like that before in your life. But you're going to be working at a job in 1 year's time from when you started. Your friend still got 4 more years before he's ready to even put a resume on the market, right? So you've got 3 years of production experience by the time your friend comes on the market. Let's say your friend was wonderfully talented and pushed himself so hard, he managed to actually get into a job from university, which is so rare. But let's say he did, but still, he's still learning foundation level skills, and you're the lead over your friend at that point. So from an investment standpoint, yes, private's pretty expensive, and it is a tough sell to a lot of people. But you can imagine those 3 extra years of earning potential you're going to get because you graduated from Lost Boys and you got to work for another 3 years, not even thinking about what kind of experience you're gaining and adding value to yourself during that 3 years. But yeah, it is a really good thing in visual effects to go fast. Find that fast track. Don't cut corners. Like if we try and go too quick, then obviously it's not going to be the same quality. But 1 year intensive, yeah, don't underestimate what someone can do in 1 year's time if they're really focused on that thing.
Let's start from the beginning, and that's like getting in the door to your school, and that would be
Mm-hmm.
admissions. Um, Obviously, your selection is very selective. What do you look for when you kind of like cull the herd, so to speak, and choose those that you
Yeah,
think that won't? Because I honestly believe one of the reasons why schools, the faculty get way down and they get jaded and angry and just they don't care anymore, is they get bombarded by baby crybabies, and they have that contrast where they're fighting between helping the crybabies and helping
yeah,
the mavericks.
yeah.
And that actually plays a part in the morale, I think, in the teachers. Because if they don't have students that are inspired, the teachers will not care, even if the teachers are talented.
Yeah.
So if you could go into your like admissions process, I'd just be
Yeah.
curious how that works.
Yeah, so I mean, I experienced that teaching at the film school, right? You would have maybe 2 or 3 students in each class that actually wanted to go and become a visual effects artist at the end of it. And they were desperate to learn as much as they could in that amount of time. But there was all this distraction of daycare, for some kids, honestly. I hate to say it, but it sounded cool, so they want to be cool. And they chew away at the instructor's time, let alone the energy levels of that instructor. But just that individual that really wants to stay focused, they just can't in that situation because that instructor is too bogged down. But our admissions process, yes. So what we're looking for is people that have already, like I said, begun the journey a little bit. So really, I mean, anyone watching this channel, you've begun the journey. You've already kind of stumbled through the internet going, what is this visual effects thing? What is compositing? You said there's a lot of people that come to your channel specifically to learn compositing. So it's great. They're already learning about those very specific disciplines inside of it. And hopefully, with the internet, you have a ton of resources. You can begin that journey. You can start to do some tutorials. There's a lot of cost-effective options. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the people that started and are trying and know what they're getting into. They've already beat their head against the wall. It's like, I'm trying to learn Houdini. I'm trying to learn compositing. And I've done this well so far. But, please help me get that final gap. So that's what we're looking for. The ones that did put in the hard work and it's obviously it's thankless when you're trying to learn on your own, right? There's no one there to congratulate you when you pull off. So maybe mom pats you on the back now and again, but really you have to be self-driven to be able to push your way through learning on your own a little bit. So we're looking for people that they're not just completely new. They're not going to say, I like movies. It's like they like movies, but they also learned about this craft inside of it that they're super stoked on learning more. And when you fill a classroom full of people like that, they rock it. It's not even like it's as an instructor, yes, you get to take credit for it, but it's amazing what happens when you put a lot of like-minded people that are very energetic about learning a craft into a room together. They learn a ton from each other as well. So it's a huge doubling of resource. Is that I don't have to be responsible for training everyone either, because there's so many other brilliant minds inside that classroom to help push that development of the artist forward. So yeah, it's we have to find those people with the energy. We have to find the potential. Right? Find the people with the huge potential to do really well. And it's generally, you can see it through the energy. It's not necessarily even, did they do amazing quality work yet? It's like, no, you won't know how to do that yet. That takes years of experience to get your quality bar up. But we just want to see the energy and the motivation to learn and do whatever it takes to get to that job. And those are the guys or gals that we bring into the program.
Wow. So what, with that, we see now that you have a location in, am I correct on this? Is this the right address?
Yeah.
For where you guys are
office.
Located? And it feels like, again, I feel like this is like Cal Arts before Cal Arts went commercial, you know? It's like very specific Mavericks coming together and teaching at a very nice looking small little building.
Yeah.
And I just, it's really cool, man. I'm really inspired by what you guys are doing. And what made you guys kind of, unless we're jumping ahead here, kind of make it over to Montreal, obviously?
Yeah, so the Montreal story. So it started probably a good 4 years ago or so. So Montreal, as far as if we look at all the production work, visual effects production work that's done in Canada, you've got us on the West Coast in Vancouver. They're doing a huge chunk of it. But and you've got Toronto kind of in the middle. They're a little more, they've been around for a while. They do more commercials. They do film and stuff, but it wasn't at the growth level that we see happening in Montreal. So Montreal went through a huge growth phase over the last 7 years or so. So when we first went there, and like I said, studios have, it's a globalized market, right? So all the big facilities have divisions in all the major production centers. So our friends in the industry from Vancouver, and just because obviously we're in touch with everybody, when they set up in Vancouver, in Montreal, they're like, you guys have to come here. We need a school like you to push the bar in Montreal. We need access to higher level junior talent, because we're in a growth phase in Montreal, and it's difficult for us. The education scene wasn't quite as developed as Vancouver, to put it in a nice way. So we started the journey about 4 years ago, and we first started with our Houdini program, because that was the FX TD program. It was something that was in major demand in Montreal and difficult because nobody taught Houdini anywhere near in that area. So we pushed that one forward, and we brought in a lead, Sean Lucchio. He's very experienced. All of our leads are people from the industry with over a decade of experience. So they're able to really kind of know what's important from a department lead standpoint. So he headed that up, and we started off with our effects. We had to make an effects artist program, because what we learned is Quebec is a completely different country than the rest of Canada. And I'm going to try to say this in a nice way. It was very challenging for us, but we made it through. Let's just go to the happy ending. Yeah. So, but we had to start off small and be very careful. My wife and I were painting the walls and doing workstation builds, because it wasn't a sure thing if you can get into the market. Private education is a little bit different in Quebec. It's relatively new. You're essentially kind of put in the same slot as public schools. They don't really understand what private schools are yet. So we had to try and fit into this really strange shape to make everything work, but we did. And what we're trying to do is mirror our operation in Vancouver. So it's not about scale. It's about, we have these models that work, this pattern that works. Let's recreate that same pattern inside of Montreal. So right now it's teaching effects and compositing out of our Montreal office. And that's just, again, really important, because the market there was expanding and new. So they needed a lot of junior talent. So there's it just made everyone happy to go there. And I still have some hair on the top of my head, so it was worth it.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring. And again, I just for those of you guys that are interested, check out Lost Boys Studios.com, I believe it is, or just
Yeah.
And there's some really, I haven't really delved into this too much, but you got your different programs here. Let's see, open them up. There we go. Compositing. It's interesting. It's like, yeah, I think about it. Average Joe that comes out of high school, I want to be a compositor, or I want to be an
Yeah.
effects technical director. It's like these aren't even. It's I've never thought of it something so simple as to call call the basket cases by having it just be these three titles in regards to the major. Something that's
Yeah.
simple, like a lighting artist,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really cool. Now, one thing we didn't talk about was how do you choose faculty and the experience of your faculty? And I mean, it's also beneficial. You've got one huge thing, which is you're located in two of the major hubs for VFX right now,
Yeah.
and that is like crucial. Like I'm out in Indiana right now, and
Mhm.
there's cornfields surrounding me at Purdue,
Yeah.
and I've been telling some of the master's students I'm with, I'm like, get ready to move,
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
gonna have to move. There
Yeah.
ain't nothing out here but corn.
Yeah, well, that was the early days of Lost Boys Learning. We were over on Vancouver Island, and we all had to get in, rent the minivans and drive across to Vancouver to be able to see studios. But yeah, obviously you want to be where the action is. You want to be able to have easy access to these studios. Like under normal times, we'd be able to open a lot of doors for our students, get them in to see all the major studios, and also meet key people, which is really, really important for career development. But yeah, being where the action is kind of important.
Can you kind of go into a little bit on your lighting artist?
Yeah, so the lighting
curriculum?
program is a bit of an anomaly it's a little bit of an experiment outside of our normal program. So like I said, our other programs are 1 year long intensives, but with lighting, we needed to we didn't need to, but we decided to experiment with something new. It's a lot shorter program. It's I believe it's 5 months now. It just evolved a little bit thanks to COVID. It's completely online. But yeah, with the lighting program, it's intense. You already have to have begun your journey and done some 3D. We don't have time to teach you all the foundations of 3D. What we need is people that have already done that journey, and now you want to go get a job in one of the local studios in visual effects or animation as a lighting artist. So we prepare assets for them, and that was a big part of the development, is making sure we had assets available so that they could quickly load up a mesh and then start focusing on their craft, which was lighting, trying to get emotion in there, trying to get all the aspects of what makes lit shot really sell and add to it. So a lot of time prepping assets for it. And also, when we first started Katana, there was no schools teaching Katana.
I was just going to ask you, and I was afraid to ask because some places would be like, no, we haven't gotten into that. But I was just, you took the words right out of my mouth. Katana.
Yeah. So like, there's just was nothing. No one would try to using Katana, and we found out why. But anyway, the lighting program began when my friend who's a trainer at Sony in Vancouver. They've got about 1,200 artists. They're always desperate for lighting artists. He was like, Mark, I've got 2 shows coming in this spring. We need to hire 250 lighting artists, and I've got nothing. I can't. He was a trainer, and he would try and train, but there's a limit. He's like, I need a few from your school trained to that level so that they can like help out some of these other guys that are coming up. So it's like, all right. If you promise to hire the whole first class, we'll go forward on this program. But it took us 2 months because we had to build. Katana itself is just a framework. I mean, there's a lot of advanced tools inside of it, but it's designed to go into a very large production pipeline that has a lot of support in different areas to be able to connect everything together. So a lot of the tools, and also, yes, studios have a lot of proprietary tools that they utilize especially when it comes to the rendering side of things. So when we hired our instructor, Francois Gendron, he was at Sony at the time. He was like, great, yes, let's crack open Katana. And then it's like, all right, we'll just load these tools. And it's like, oh my God, these tools don't exist outside of Sony. These tools don't exist outside of Industrial Light and Magic. So we had to meet with all the pipeline leads from the different studios that use Katana and go, okay, they can't show us the tool, like how it's actually built, because that's all proprietary. But what they can do is they show us what the tool does. And so we had to build a whole suite of tools to add to Katana. So it took 2 months of development of coding to get these things running so that it had similar tool sets to if you went to Sony, you would be able to know what the tool sets were like. If you went to ILM, you knew what the tool sets were like. And on and on and on. So that was hard, and I understand that's not what a normal school is going to be able to pull off. So that was a bit tricky, but it paid off again. Katana's evolved a lot, so I should put this out there for any other schools that are planning on doing it. It's a lot easier to set up now. The Katana's been developing over the time. But again, I keep using the word software words, and I know students focus a lot on software when they first start their journey. They're like, oh, you're going to teach me Houdini, you're going to teach me Katana. They heard online somewhere that there was this demand for that. But I think if you're about to enter into a career journey in visual effects, you got to stop thinking about software. Software is just one of the tools you're going to use in your career to be able to achieve that craft. So we don't call it the Katana program, we call it the lighting program. We don't call it the Houdini program, we call it the effects technical director program, or the new programs, comp. Stop obsessing about software. That will change. It always has changed. It always will change. You don't know. You can't predict how long this software is going to be around. Just see it as a tool that you can add to your belt to be able to do your craft. And make sure you understand that the amount of time that you spend developing your skills, it's not on learning software. Learning software happens really fast. What you need to focus on is learning those craft skills to be able to figure out any kind of challenge that production might throw at you once you hit the ground running.
I see here you're ranked number 3 by worldwide for visual effects schools. What's number 1 and 2? Because
so
what's your competition?
First year we hit 5. The second year we hit second, and we're 5 points behind Noman. So Noman likes to grab number 1 slot commonly. They have that energy going, and also we need to understand too, the rookies it's like an online contest, right? So it's a business. It's important. It's valuable to have really sexy character models, right? Like that's something that the internet loves. You can never get enough sexy character models, and sometimes the more technical aspects of, like, say, learning compositing or something might not be as sexy when it comes to just clicks on a website than it would be a really cool character model.
Yeah, it's very subjective the way they judge these things.
They do tend to land a lot with studios or schools that are focusing a lot on character work, right? Which is cool. That's good on them. But we're seeing now their judges are getting a little more. We're getting more representation, like compositors that are judging, not just 3D guys that are judging, so they can actually see and judge, okay, what is this? What is that? How valuable is this skill as a compositor? And that's how they're ranking a lot of the stuff, which is great with the rookies. It's not just how much advertising did we buy. A big portion of it is, are your students job ready? And that's something that schools are rarely ever held to task on. And so it's great to see that developing. But yeah, we've got, Noman, we compete with a lot. Think Tank, which focuses a lot on character modeling and things like that. They're great guys. We're friends with them. They're like a kind of a situation like Lost Boys, and they are focusing on niche crafts. But anyway, and it's us. And there's a few other schools around the world, and they're all getting good. There are definitely in the top 10. There's some pretty good schools out there, but we all have slightly different philosophies on how to best spend time, and I feel that we have the right formula for that. But we might not always win the contests for popularity awards, 3D character models and things like that. But
specifically, these concentrations never get the limelight, they deserve, so to speak.
Yeah. It's great to see your YouTube channel putting a little light on it.
Yeah, it's weird. On my YouTube channel, I try to stay away from modeling and all this stuff. I'm like, look, let's even though it's called VFXforFilmmakers.com, I'm like, I just want to concentrate on compositing.
Let's get some film in there, right? Let's get that film footage background. Yeah, that's what we like too.
Did you want to talk a little bit, before we go into the questions, a little bit on the compositing and the effects technical director? Can you kind of give like a bird's eye view if somebody were going to come into your program for both of these, what their year would look like, timeline-wise?
Sure. So let's start. We'll finish with comp, because you tend to have a bit of a comp focus on your channel. Let's start with the effects technical director program. So it's a year-long program, and what we've done is we've looked at common skill sets that are required, common challenges. There's always patterns in visual effects work. There's certain types or genres of visual effects work, just like there's genres of music or something. So we analyze what those genres are, and we design projects that are going to expose the student to that very specific area and let them master it, and then use those skills to build on into the next project, which is supposed to show them a whole other aspect of it. So the Effects Technical Director program's been broken down to not too many projects. I think it's about 5 or 6 projects. So they're going to spend a long time working on each project, and that's reality of being an Effects Technical Director. Maybe first off, does everyone know what Effects Technical Director is? Because sometimes it's difficult to get good explanations on it, but it's a title that's used a lot in the industry, just for anyone who's an effects artist. I personally think there's a big difference between an effects artist and an effects technical director. Effects artist is going to be implementing tools that were generated by the effects technical director to accomplish shots in a film. Whereas an effects technical director, they will do effects artist work, but they have a higher level of responsibility to build very efficient tool sets that can then be fed into production to be able to produce sequences of things that have never been done before, specifically in the areas of so common effects tasks. You all see water, smoke, fire, digital destruction, sometimes just that simple atmospheric stuff. You need snow, you need rain, and things like that. And what am I missing in there? So we're going to do proceduralism is a huge part of Houdini, and so our very first project, they do proceduralism, and that it's not that they're going to get hired generating a lot of models in their careers as an effects artist, but it allows them to see how data flows inside of Houdini, to learn under the hood, and that's what makes Houdini super powerful, is that there's not limitations of just using custom or little shelf tools. You can build those shelf tools. You can really control what goes on in that, and that's what film needs. They need full control on everything. So they do the geometry aspect. In that, they're going to be learning about rendering and lighting and things with Houdini, and then they're going to pump into particle logic and understanding how to make things flow. So sometimes that might be a crowds project or something. How do we make agents that are going to do things that we want them to do? And that's kind of more the understanding the animation side of Houdini from an effects standpoint. So it's like just what's relevant to the effects guys. So you have to understand animation, but these special things you need to know really well. And then they're going into digital destruction, which is a huge thing these days, and it takes so much work to do digital destruction efficiently, right? So they learn digital destruction workflows. Obviously, you've got pyro is a huge part of that. They're doing all the smoke systems and fire and volumetrics, and so pyro is a whole module on its own. Vellum's a new thing that everyone's so hot on, so we got a module on that. And then you saw some projects in that background where they have live action backgrounds, and that's sometimes where they'll work with the compositors on a group project, and it's kind of a simulated production experience where they have to produce the assets. They're acting as an effects TD, generating a tool, and then they take on the role as an effects artist and try and do a sequence and have continuity and flow and all those aspects of it, as well as trying to get integration sorted, which is something that sometimes is important to an effects TD. In pipeline, there's other departments a lot of the time, but every once in a while you have to understand that. And and they get an experience of working in a team. And it's a lot more complicated working as a team than it is when you just have only yourself to be responsible to, and that's their career. When they move out there, there's going to be huge teams of very competent artists need to work together on deliveries of things. So that's effects in a nutshell. Then there's the compositing program. So compositing is more. We've got a lot of projects. So our compositing lead designed this curriculum that has, it's maybe about 22 on average, 20 projects through the year. And that's going to expose them to lots of different challenges, as well as building up certain core aspects. We call them like the pillars of compositing is going to be, you've got your rotoscoping, you've got your keying, you've got your paint, and you've got integration. Integration is a fairly big one, but those are the kind of 4 pillars there. So in order to get really good at this, you have to just have a lot of exposure and experience. So they're going to be doing, different types of rotoscoping, different types of paint, different types of integration to make sure that they have that big basket of skills under their belt to be able to jump into the industry running. That's something that I did want to talk about. That's, if I'm going to summarize too, the compers have a practicum component. The practicum is pretty valuable. you get placed out into a studio for the last 2 months of the program, and you're going to be learning a lot of the proprietary stuff. Like I said, every studio has a slightly different way of doing something. So it's good to get exposure to a studio pipeline and see what that's like. It's a totally different animal than working in a really small production team. So yeah, they get that experience. They get to meet some contacts, and obviously it really contributes to the placement rate, because generally the studio's like, keep that person, get them on somehow. And in Montreal, both the programs, the effects and comp, have practicums too, just so you know. It's
So
a little bit
you
different
have
in
a
Montreal.
trustworthy rapport with a lot of the local studios surrounding your
Yes, that's
your
the,
actual school.
yeah.
So
That's
when
the
they
only way we
know
can
that
make our
they know your school's got a very limited amount of students, they know they're going to get quality, and they know they can trustfully bring them in for 2 months.
Yeah, yeah. So that's important to understand too. As an artist coming up, you're like, okay, well, I'd work for free for a big studio if I had to learn. But unfortunately, they don't necessarily have the people and the time to be able to train a junior, right? They can train in certain things, but they can't go too deep in it. They're not designed for that. They're designed for producing visual effects, not for education. So yeah, our artists, we have to be able to prove to studios that you can take one of our students, drop them in, and you can set them even unsupervised to be able to do certain tasks, and they can be busy working on those things, and you can get productive ability out of them. They're not polishing fingerprints off the front window or fetching coffee. They're actually in that department doing things that a junior level artist would be doing, and that's a very difficult thing. It took a long time to get studio trust to be able to get them to say, yes, we would love to have some Lost Boys in our for their practicum component. And a lot of the time, students were getting like multiple production credits in that 2-month period. So you're graduating with some feature film credits under your belt, which puts you at a totally different level than other film school graduates would be having.
I mean, I could not believe you guys reel. I go, this can't be. They must be like lying. When I saw the quality of the reels, I go, these are current students, graduates, just recent graduates. I go, oh my gosh, like what, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, again, and that was, like I said, we had to train the industry a little bit in the beginning to just go, okay, how did the student pull this off? We don't trust this reel necessarily. It's like, and also we have similar shots, right? Because if we produce a batch of footage for the students for that year, you may see similar shots across Lost Boys reels. But what we had to train was we had to bring in the leads as well as the recruiters, and allow the leads to explain to recruiters, like, why is that? What am I going to judge when I look at that shot? I'm judging the compositing of that shot. I need to look outside that, the background plate is the same as another student. They're not the same. There's a lot of differences. And an experienced artist can look at a shot and go, yes, this guy's really solid at his color correction. This one's really solid at their matting skills. This one's really solid at paint out. So we needed that influence of the leads on recruiters to get the buy-in from them, but now they get it, and it's awesome. And a lot of the studios are actually saying, like, recommending to incoming students from other schools, like, try and follow this model if you can, because it's showing us what we need to see in order to give you a job.
Well,
sorry, did I go off topic?
I'd love to talk your ear off, but I think
like I
we
said,
should
I
jump
could go
over to
forever.
questions here.
Yep.
And what we have here is, and again, this has been an awesome interview. I was afraid whoever I was going to be talking to on the other end, I didn't know who you were. All I knew was you were the founder of this awesome school, and I'm like, and I'll leave you with this as far as the future of Lost Boys is in your hands. So as you become a father and eventually transition to a grandfather,
Yeah.
the question is, who are you going to hand that off to?
Yeah.
And that'll
I'll
be the
find someone
question, because it's
equally
who
insane.
you leave this stuff in the hands of. I really believe you control the quality of Lost Boys, and as long as your ambition, your excitement, your desire to walk in every day and paint the walls and help the students, and and I can tell that's in you. You just by talking to you have that zeal to get up every morning. I compared you to my friend Chris Tadine. He has a zeal that is like without, I don't know how the energy gets there, but it's just there. It's like, gosh, how do you, every day, and he's just like, check what I found out in Houdini, da, 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 da. And I'm just like, man, I need to take a rest once in a while, but
Yeah.
but we got,
well,
go ahead, sorry.
keep in mind, I have energy, and you do get your butt kicked by visual effects. It is a tough one sometimes. There is not an easy cakewalk, but so it's always a balance. And as far as who it goes to after this, I don't know. But I've basically built the work environment that I want in my life, so I'm happy to be here for as long as my staff don't kick me out one day. Yeah.
Well, we got Manoj Manoharan
Yeah,
from
Manoj.
Madlooks VFX. What's the future of education training for visual effects and animation? I am seeing a lot of changes in every kind of education or training with the adoption of new technologies. So just curious to know your view about that.
Yeah. All right, Manoj, good question. So the future of education for visual effects and animation. And then they also kind of touch upon the adaptation of new technologies. So like I was saying before, the adaptation of new technologies, that is a bit of that when we're software focused, when we're really focused on the tools. So that part, I don't, of course, every school is going to adapt to the new tech. Okay, wait. They aren't going to adapt to all the new technologies. Okay, we will. That part's easy. But what I think the hardest part of changing education so that it works better for studios is this specialization. I don't know how well they're going to be able to do at that. But that's what studios need. The vast majority of jobs, right? 99% of jobs need high-end specialists. If you look at all the jobs out there, you might go, oh, Mark's wrong. You know, it's like, if I work at this commercial company, I need to be a generalist. It's like, well, that's true. But there's 5 guys in that commercial shop. Whereas there's studios on average have like 500 to 1,000 artists. So the vast majority of jobs are highly specialized skill sets. And that's what needs to happen. You need to get training in a very highly specialized craft. They don't have time to develop the talent the way they used to. You didn't come in, you're a lifer at ILM and you work your way up from the mailroom. They have you in on that show and you're there for maybe an 8-month contract. And maybe at the end of that contract, you're going across the street to another studio. So that studio doesn't necessarily have the time or the motivation to train you. You have to come in ready to work and at least be at that bar where you can learn through doing more shots at that point. So future of education, I'd like to see public schools, more cost-effective ways, internet, providing good general overview of what this industry is like. And then I'm hoping more boutique schools come out like Lost Boys that can really push you across the bridge into that job and industry.
And the question, well, of course, and COVID introduced this to us, is this online training versus the hybrid. You know,
Yeah.
Any opinion about that? Like,
yeah, so COVID, what a kicker. So it is hard. If you're a student right now, this is going to be tricky. And just know this is temporary. It's a temporary thing that we're going through. But COVID's made all the studios switch to remote, right? So they have the vast majority of their talent is working from home over a little PC over IP box, which is cool for some of the more senior artists because, hey, I get to see my family a little bit more. My commute times disappeared. I could maybe think about living anywhere on the planet in a cheaper location. So it opens up a lot of opportunities. But it's so complicated because if you're a junior, you need to be around people like that to learn. Those are the people that are going to take you to the next level. So I'm hoping that we get through this in the next year or so, and we just need to keep working on our skills to be ready for when that moment comes. But breaking in the industry with COVID is tough. Our guys are challenged, and our guys are ready to go. Like you can sit unsupervised, and our artists can pull off shots. But yeah, it's going to be really tricky.
did you have to switch
Temporary.
completely over to online in the middle of this people's intense year and all that?
Everybody learned new skills really fast because it was a necessity, right? Like we had everything converted to online in 1 week, one very long week, both studios. So, but we did cut some corners in that we were able to shift all of our server-based workflow to localized workflow, and we shipped all of our workstations home to students because we just needed to make sure that they still had, because not everyone had the same quality of workstation, and it would have been pretty painful to troubleshoot someone having a Mac with software problems versus Linux versus Windows. So we handed out the workstations, so that part was simple. And there was a lot of tools that were available. It was ripe for someone to say, hey, we can work from home. But I personally feel learning, you want that exposure to everyone around you. Just like when you go to an industry, I said you need to have those senior artists around you to really develop the skill sets. We are back in-house. We've been back in-house since the summer, where I built custom dividers amongst all the desks and a negative air pressure filtration system that's like constantly pulling air from your little cubicle zone out to filtration systems, just to try and make the safest possible environment. And we've been a little lucky in Vancouver. Our numbers have been really low. People have been consistently wearing their masks. So
I have been within classes where I think like every other student is like, I'm back, I had COVID, and I'm like, oh, how was it? You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I guess I'm next. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
we at Purdue actually managed to get through the semester without having any closed downs. Half of my classes were online, half of my classes were on the ground. But one thing that brought to my attention was thinking ahead what Apple's developing and been patenting and is the augmented reality volumetric capture of people, and they want to
yeah.
offboard the processing to an iPhone through these eyeglasses or whatever they're going to call them. I'm thinking that might be the future of compositing and interfacing as a
Yeah.
volumetric readout of somebody in front of you. And you're like, I'm home here and I have my instructor's face right over here. I
Yeah.
have a couple of 3D models in front of me over here, and I have my screen, the old school screen. I think the future is not going to be these squares we're trying to learn technology through. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's going to be some kind of augmented reality, and we're doing a lot of research here at the school, which is kind of cool.
That's good to hear.
And yeah, I don't know. It's a
Yeah,
weird
because
time.
it needs something like that. We need something where it's a little bit more. I mean, you can do Zoom conference calls, you can do Skype conference calls, but it's never the same as being in that same room with someone. So hopefully, yes, this does push development of new tools and new workflows. Personally, as a senior artist, I do like the idea of not being tied to a specific location. Huge amount of new opportunity could open up across the planet for a lot of people that just aren't living in the right spot. That might not be a problem for them in the future. So there's an upside. Definitely, there's an upside to COVID. It's traditionally that's been a very difficult thing because Marvel and Netflix, they have very high security in all their productions. It's like your cell phone gets left at the front desk, like it's super, super, super high security. But if they want their shows done, they have to trust that visual effects artists can be professionals and can work from home and make sure not to leak anything. And it's most important that the work gets done. So that's really helped soften them up because the studios are always just reacting to whatever, like the visual effects studios react to what the film studios need and want. And, if they have concerns over something, they say, no problem, we'll do that. They don't argue with them and say there's a better way. So it will push some stuff forward. And augmented reality sounds super cool.
We have a W season how to get into VFX during COVID. I think we just discussed that.
Yeah, so we did touch on that. I think my eyes were going to that. It's going to be tricky. I think you need to think about maybe you can collaborate. There is a lot of film production still being done, at least in Vancouver. We were just watching because last spring they always have a number of productions that are being filmed at one point. When COVID first hit, it just tanked flat. And of course, everyone's worried going, how's this going to hit post-production? 8 months from now, we're going to have this huge shadow, but they've been going gangbusters over the summer, and there is film production being done. They are finding ways to be as careful as possible with daily tests, sometimes multiple times a day. I don't know what that's like, but yeah, they're finding ways to continue. So you might find you can do some stuff. You probably might need to volunteer again, like we did in the old days, find some smaller production that you can try and get your hands onto and help them out any way you can, and just keep building those skills so that when the gates open up, when they need more people and they're ready to take juniors, you're there for them. But yeah, it's going to be tricky. But maybe you're in a weird location, and because of all the remote workflow,
Well, he says
that
he's in
might open
London.
opportunities.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's okay.
where's the best place right now for a compositor to be? Somebody that's coming right out of school. Would that be Montreal, Vancouver, or London, or somewhere
It
else?
bounces. It bounces. I would have said Montreal, just because they were in a growth phase. So as a junior artist, there's always this more opportunity whenever studios are growing. They need to acquire a lot of people fast. I do think London's pretty good, though. I think just recently there's been a bit of a shift. I think compositing jobs in London, it's totally there. You have that opportunity waiting for you. So I'd say it's a good call.
And the hours.
Yeah, yeah, that's another
Had to like
conversation
stick
altogether.
that
But
in there.
hey, that opportunity to learn many hours a day, you're going
Yeah.
to be super strong at the end of it. Maybe if you don't like that, you have an opportunity to move on and find something that's more in line with what you like.
We have a cycling cat. I love this guy's name. Best advice to integrate CG and live action in LOGCC format and how to properly integrate grain, color, shadows. Take it away.
All right, Kat. Spend 1 year with us, and I'll show you. And it doesn't matter if it's log C or log V or whatever. It's just compositing, right? It's all data when it comes into the compositing stage. So anything that you would learn on any kind of footage to integrate grain, color, and shadows would apply to log C format as well, right? It's this one little technical step you have to learn to make it happen. So yeah, I'm sorry. That's a huge long answer that we train our guys for a year to be able to do. But to start practicing your color matching, and I know there's online resources available for learning about grain and color matching. So get out there online and hit it up. There's no shortcuts. You gotta do the homework.
We got Parth Dashora. How hard is it to first just pass out junior artists from Lost Boys to get a permanent job as a compositor in Vancouver and Montreal, considering the competition among skilled and newbies?
Yeah. Okay, another great question. It's freaking hard. I'm not going to lie. It is really freaking hard. Even Lost Boys that spend all year focusing in and are at a completely different level than every other graduate, it is still hard to break into the industry. And I'll tell you why. It's important to understand, like I said earlier, visual effects studios is a global market. They'll have London operations. They'll have Montreal operations. They may have a Vancouver studio. They may have a studio in India. They span the whole planet. And with globalization, they're going to be shifting certain types of work to different types of geographic locations based on cost effectiveness, right? So let's say you're in India. Maybe your skills need to be really strong in roto and paint and like these things that were easily quantified and shipped off without to be done in a cheaper location. But in Vancouver, what that means to a graduate is all the typical entry-level zones that you would go into, they've been outsourced. Those don't exist. The only jobs that are available in North America, at least, are very high level. So even if you got a job as a rotoscope artist in Vancouver, you think, oh, that's entry level, surely. But no, you're tasked with the shots that couldn't be outsourced, the really, really tricky, high level, skilled shots. That paint shot, never underestimate how difficult a paint shot can be. So our graduates need to be this level. So, and that's what I was saying earlier, like if you come out of university and you make it into the industry, wow, good job, buy a lottery ticket. Because it is not easy to get in. They're going to put, if you get entered on a entry level rotoscoping shot, is a freaking hard shot. Yeah. So
wow.
Anyway, it's not easy, and you've got to have the right training. And you better be specialized if you want to get in.
One more reason to go to Lost Boys.
Or find a school that's similar.
Yeah. Well,
please do your homework though, because this is a for-profit industry. Education is business. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of money in this industry. Think about those large schools that take in like hundreds of students a year, and the amount that they're charging. They can spend a lot on marketing, and they can tell you anything you want to hear. You got to figure out what is actually being delivered by that program by talking to the industry. Go to where you're going to get a job. Ask them. You have the internet. You can hit up people on LinkedIn till all day long and find these answers. You can find graduates from those schools. Hit them up. Ask them how it's like. Are they working? Did they get a job? There's a lot you can do to make it easier on yourself.
I got L Netty. Hi, specialized demo reel, crowd fluid, etc., or general reel. Which one has a better impact to find a job? In general,
who's been listening?
Yeah. In general, it's good to have to be specialized in one area, be so good in it. The future of software, paid versus free, Houdini versus Blender. Will a free software be a good or better or paid one? Students at different levels in the same class, do they do the same task projects? Do teachers have different lectures for different students' needs?
Wow, lots of good questions there. Okay, so let's start with the first one, specialized demo reel. So yeah, I think I've said that a bazillion times so far. I can't be more clear. You need to have a specialized demo reel if you want to get into the vast majority of jobs which are in feature film right now. Yes, and you can even specialize within that. So, when we train an effects technical director, if you go out into the industry, it's really common that you'll find effects artists that specialize in niches. There's like, I am the fire guy. When there's really challenging fire, they hire me for their show. Or I'm the water person, or I should be saying people because it's gender neutral here, guys. But yeah, specialization is really important. If you think that you have like a super interest in crowds or just fluids, go for it. But it does help to be able to balance a little bit. I think if coming to Lost Boys and you had that whole year to dedicate, you could learn like those 6 major skill sets. But if you didn't have that opportunity, then absolutely, even pick one of those niches inside of effects or compositing to really focus in on, and that'll help you stand out from the gazillions of demo reels that the recruiters have to go through. Let's see, which one has a better impact? Yeah, so they need to see what they're hiring for in that show reel. So yeah, always specialize. Okay. Now, future of students of software, paid versus free, Houdini versus Blender. So I'm a huge advocate of open source. I think it's really great when people produce open source software. And in fact, a lot of the main development came out of open source software. Blender alone has helped to push a lot of the paid commercial software to develop those tools that were developed inside Blender for their commercial zone. So it's not really which one's better or not, but you got to think if you're going to be spending your time, and your time is a very limited amount, it's precious to you, then might as well learn the software that you're going to get hired to work with, right? So Houdini, there is versions of it that you can download for free and legitimately learn on. Nuke also has the same situation. So as cool as it is to get your feet wet with something like Blender, I think it's a great software. Don't underestimate the value of actually learning the tools that they're going to be hiring into. Because like I said, they don't necessarily have time to develop you like they used to. So if you come in saying, yeah, I know Blender, they're like, great, we don't use Blender. So bye-bye, sorry. So yeah, definitely learn some of the commercial software.
Okay. You want to keep?
We got students at different levels in the same class. So this is an important one because we do get students from all different levels. So people, you might think, oh, well, just only ringers go to Lost Boys, only people with a ton of experience. But we get a wide variety of people. Like I said, we're looking for potential when we bring in our students, not huge amounts of experience in that area. They don't have to have that. They do. Sometimes we have people coming in with some of the oldest was like a decade of experience coming in and just wanting to like kick themselves up to the next level, maybe switch from TV commercials into feature film. But a lot of our students are starting out, and so they don't have the same experience levels, but project-based learning is what allows for everyone to be pushed up to their challenge level. And we always want that. We never want to have a student that's bored, sitting there like, oh, why do I have to sit through this class with all the newbies right now? We need to have an environment where everyone is put to their maximum potential. So with the projects, we basically, as mentors, we know what an experienced person should be doing. We see what their skill levels are. We'll push them into a concept that really uses those skill levels, pushes those skill levels, and expands their weak points. And with the junior artists, we'll be like, here's some foundations that really need to be hit in that project. So we're gonna tailor that concept to really make sure that you understand those foundations. And it's amazing. You'll see the ones with less experience catch up quite quickly to the people that came in with experience, just with that model. So I think project-based learning is really, really important. Not having super rigid curriculum that can't be flexed a little bit to tweak for the individual, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so sometimes it looks like the same project, but the instructors are tuning it so that it's best for that individual.
I love the fact that you guys take the time to photograph new plates from time to time and change it up. That's really cool. That's a dedication that's not seen much. I got a how-to, I guess that's his name, Houdini CG workflow tip for students and beginners. And he also says, mocap suit or marked motion capture, what is best? Most of the big budget Hollywood movies are marked motion capture. Why?
Okay, and how do we make 1917? Right. All right, how to. Very ambitious questions.
Yes.
And some of them are a little niche technical, so I might not be the best person to answer these for you. But the Houdini CG workflow tip for students and beginners. Workflow tip.
Sometimes on Facebook, if you go on some Facebook group pages, somebody will write, they can put a text of a big word, like big words, and they'll write something. But sometimes people will write like, what is compositing? And I'm like, come on. Like, so sometimes I'll write like, I'll go in there and just play around, be like, what is CG? Get like 1,000 comments, just to like throw them off, like what? But anyway, I mean, some of the people that come through here, I'm not trying to bash them or nothing, but they're like, hey, just show me how to do this. It's like, no, I made it very clear when I did the video we're interviewing you, where this is a concentration on education,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No worries. So how to. There's, like I said, there's no quick way. There's no simple answer other than go get your hands dirty and start playing around with it. And you've got a huge amount of free resources at your fingertips on YouTube alone. So start dipping in. And once you get to a stage you need some professional training, call us up and we'll get you into that job. Mocap suit or marked motion capture, which is best? You think most of the big budgeted Hollywood movies use marked motion capture. Why? Well, keep in mind, how do we learn about things like that? We see breakdowns, right? So it's normal now for studios to produce visual effects breakdowns as marketing material for their up and coming film. Visual effects has made it to that level where people are actually interested in it, and it's a selling point for some feature films. And a lot of the times we see behind the scenes stuff for big budget films, you'll see the marked motion capture. Let's say, I don't know, Pirates of the Caribbean, you see the guys in the gray suits with the little markers all over them. That's ILM specifically. That's their system. They've got witness cameras on set that are getting multiple angles of those characters, and then that data can be utilized for animation later on. And you need those guys on set because the actors need something to bounce their acting off of, right? Like if you're the only human being in this like in this shot where there's 10 CG characters around you, good luck trying to act in that kind of situation, because good actors react to what is being fed to them. What are the other characters performing? What's happening? So they need that. So that's where it's really important that you see those guys on camera, the marked motion capture suits. And keep in mind, they just use that for reference, right? So the animators are going to go beyond what it was. They just want to be able to see, how did that performance work? And I'm going to do something better. So they didn't need super high quality motion capture off those witness cameras. They just needed something basic to make sure the shot worked and functioned, as well as having something for the actors to play off. And then usually they're hand animating everything over the top, and the director's going to want modifications, and he needs that flexibility. So that's why like the marked motion capture suits are used a lot. Now the mocap suits where you're on a mocap stage, that does happen, but you just don't see it as much because it's not going to make it into the behind the scenes with actors and stuff in the shot. It's just going to be a bunch of people in a warehouse with on suits on and getting all these sequences that then got tweaked later. So I don't think it's necessarily most of the big budget Hollywood movies using the marked motion capture suit. They're also utilizing all forms of technology to get what they need done, whatever's most efficient, right? So that's hopefully can answer your question why.
And he asks one last question. How do you shoot a movie like The Camera in 1917?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
A lot of tricks.
That was a freaking amazing film, right? Like
Yes.
not many films blow my mind, but I came out of that movie theater in a sense of shock. So I saw it in IMAX resolution. It was amazing. That was a very immersive experience. It's different than what normal filmmaking is, right? Normal filmmaking, it's common. You have camera setups, but every once in a while they produce these movies where there's continuous camera take, and so much work and so much planning goes into creating a movie like that. It's a ridiculous amount of planning and experience that's needed to be able to achieve it, because it's not one continuous camera move. There's thousands of different cameras that need to be blended and integrated together, so it feels like one continuous camera move. They can't shoot that all in one take, not a movie like that at least. So yes, it is going to take a long time, and you could just try. And you'll start to learn. You're going to need some at least basic comp skills to be able to do seamless integrations, figure out transition elements. When this pole wipes in front, hey, maybe that's when I can transition to my other camera setup that needs to be a drone shot that goes off to there, right? So there's lots and lots of planning. They prepare everything in advance so that they're just following a blueprint when they film that movie. They're going to be doing a lot of things with animatics, like just pre-visualization of that shot so that they can figure out what technical requirements are going to be needed to pull it off. And then a lot of talented artists later to like clean up those rough edges and smooth it all out. So it's a huge question, but yeah, awesome film.
Well, with that said, I think we will bid adieu here. Thank you again for the interview. And if you guys are interested, check out lostboys-studios.com. And seriously, think about taking the road less traveled. You know, that's one thing I would say more than anything. This is the road less traveled, and from what I can tell, it's the most successful road, and I recommend people check it out. Again, Mark's not paying me for this. I I contacted him and I said I want to show a model that actually works and let people be aware of, especially my audience. So, and we won't go into the pricing of a school and so forth, but I'm sure you get what you pay for. And it's
an investment.
Yeah, it's an investment, and that's just the reality of today. And as you were talking about business-wise, I would say, you can get it all done in a year or spend 4 years, and then not have a job. You're not guaranteeing any work, obviously, but as far as your students graduating, but it looks like a really good placement percentage from what I'm seeing on the
You'll
website.
never find a more sure thing. Yeah, and I'd just like to say, obviously, big thanks to you, Matt, for giving us this exposure, as well as any viewers that are watching this. Like, good on you. This is what we want to see. We want to see people with the drive to take the time to sit down and watch some, somewhat abstract technical stuff now and again. But you're there, you're hungry, you're interested. So I hope to hear from you guys as you move forward in your career. And always feel free to reach out to Lost Boys and just ask questions on how can I get to the point where I would make a good applicant for your school? We consult a lot of younger, as long as you've got that energy level and you've got that potential in you, we can guide you. Again, lots of free material that you can brush up on, and we can prepare you so that when you come in, you're ready to rock for that year and ready to really launch your career off in a good way. So yeah, great stuff. Don't be quiet. Reach out, ask questions, ask for help. LinkedIn, like I said, reach out to everybody you can. It's a numbers game. There'll be some people that do have time to get back to you. And I think maybe right now, if I was a junior artist looking for advice from industry, right now might be a decent time because of COVID, everyone's worked from home. We don't have the boss over our shoulder. So like answering a quick question to a up and coming, very ambitious artist, it might be more of a reality right now, guys. You might get people reaching out to like, oh, thank God someone's talking to me. I've been alone in my apartment all day. I'll give this kid a couple of tips, right? So try it, see what happens. Especially even if you reach out you can go to our LinkedIn page, the school's LinkedIn page, and you'll see all the alumni in there too. Don't bash them too much. They're going to go, Mark, why did you get all these people asking me questions? But yeah, reach out and talk and ask questions. Be brave to ask those questions. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mark. We will see you.
Thank you, Matt.
See you around.